This is being written a few short hours after my departure from the hell on earth that was Peekskill, New York, this Sunday before Labor Day, 1949. I still hear the frenzied roar of crowds, the patter of stone against glass and flesh. I hear the wails of women, the impassioned screams of children, the jeers and taunts of wild-eyed youths. I still smell the sickening odor of blood flowing from freshly opened wounds, gasoline fumes from autos and buses valiantly trying to carry their loads of human targets out of the range of bricks, bottles, stones, sticks. I still feel the violence, the chaos which permeated the air. I still hear, smell, and feel Peekskill.
From the belly of a whale, and the Hebrew children from the fiery furnace, and why not every man? Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel? Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel, and why not every man? The moon runs down in a purple stream, the sun refused to shine. Every star did disappear. Yes, freedom shall be mine. Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel? Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel, and why not every man? Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel? Did my Lord deliver Daniel, and why not every man?
On the morning of September 4th, in Harlem, a humble man, well past middle-aged, and burdened with the wounds of 2 world wars, was walking between West 124th and 125th Street when he bumped into an old acquaintance. Buses were taking passengers upstate to a concert for Paul Robeson, and his friend was among those boarding the caravan heading north. On a whim, he decided to join them.
Mr. Eugene Bullard, will you let us have your occupation?
I am a disabled veteran.
Now, you are a veteran of World War I, are you, Mr. Bullard?
And II.
And will you give us a brief resume of your service in World War I?
I engaged voluntarily the 19th of October, 1914, in the French Foreign Legion, was in England and in school, and I went from England to Paris to engage with a bunch of young Americans, flyers.
Was that the Lafayette Escadrille?
Yes, sir.
You served throughout, right up to the armistice and after 1918?
I did. After the armistice, I was demobilized. Between time, I had been wounded 4 times. I was in the infantry and aviation.
Were you a pilot?
Yes, sir. I'm the first Negro pilot in the world.
Was there anything else you wanted to tell us about your service in World War I?
The only thing I can say I did, like every soldier, what I was supposed to do. And I obtained the French Military Medal, the Croix de Guerre, the Belgian War Cross, the Cross of the Lafayette Flying Corps, the Memorial Cross, and I brought with me from the Second World War for the French Underground, which I volunteered, living in Paris at that time, and I was decorated a few months ago with the Memorial Medal of the French Underground.
Well, now, coming down to the Paul Robeson concert, Mr. Bullard, the grand jury is interested in getting all the information that you can give in relation to the concerts. Now, when did you decide to attend the second concert that was held on Sunday afternoon, September 4th?
I decided to go that Sunday morning because in the paper I seen where there had been a possibility of trouble the first time, but the newspaper said that there would be protection for people who wanted to go. Well, I was 37 years abroad, and you know as well as I do that everybody admired Paul Robeson as a singer, and I also admired Paul Robeson. I admire anybody that's good. I went from Paris to London to hear him sing a few years back. I went from here to Philadelphia to see Ray Robinson fight. I like anything that's good. And as long as you are within the law, I think that you have a right to go anywhere that you would like to go.
Heavy mist filled the morning air. Cars and buses for the concert began to arrive at around 7:15 a.m. The effective promotion of the concert, as well as the outrage stemming from the violence that occurred on August 27th at the first planned concert, brought an audience of 15 to 30,000 men, women, and children to an overgrown golf course outside of Peekskill, a city of less than 18,000. This concert was significantly more impactful than the small, annually scheduled concert that August 27th was supposed to be, but there were many ominous signs of what was to come. Effigies of Paul Robeson were hanged in Peekskill and neighboring Putnam Valley. An organizer of both concerts, Howard Fast, recalled seeing banners stretched across the streets of Peekskill, displaying the slogan which had become a rallying cry against Robeson.
We drove into Peekskill along one of the main streets of town and saw the first of those banners which have since become the sloganized expression of that Sunday. Strung across the avenue, it read, "Wake up, America!" Peekskill did. That was the first, but the slogan was everywhere, hanging from houses, pasted on telegraph poles, and stuck on the windshields of numerous cars passing us.
Once word got out that there would be police protection for the Paul Robeson concert in Peekskill, many believed that a repeat of the previous week's violence was unlikely. 220 state troopers, more than 1/4 of the entire force in the state of New York, were assigned to the concert. In total, 904 police officers were to be present at the site of the concert and in the immediate vicinity. This was the largest assemblage of law enforcement ever to be seen in Westchester County. Under strict orders from State Police Superintendent John Gaffney, officers were instructed to be diplomatic, tactful, and to use no force under any circumstances except when absolutely necessary to preserve law and order. The police took pride in implementing the latest in modern technology in order to preserve public safety.
A radio system capable of contacting both state police and county police was set up in the state police field office trailer. Now that was located directly opposite the entrance to the field on which the meeting was to be held. This trailer served as a command post from which all police activity in the area was directed, and it also served as a headquarters for the Westchester County District Attorney and Sheriff. Also based at the command post were 3 fire trucks, 2 wrecking units, a county police department emergency truck, several portable floodlights, complete with generators, and 4 portable loudspeakers. Now, a helicopter was also on hand, which kept in radio contact with the command post at all times. Walkie-talkie equipment was available for all details that did not use the mobile units, such as reconnaissance parties in the woods and hills surrounding the meeting area. As an added precaution, a field hospital at the command post was also provided. This hospital was staffed with a doctor and 2 nurses. 2 ambulances were also made available.
Paul Robeson and those with him were skeptical, given the police response the previous week. Robeson would organize his own security force composed of members from various unions, such as Local 65 of the warehouse workers and the International Fur and Leather Workers Union, led by Vice President Leon Strauss. He wore his uniform and overseas cap that day, as did many other Union guards, signifying that they too were veterans, like those who were there to protest the concert. But this was not seen as an act of solidarity by the veterans of the Peekskill area. The Peekskill Evening Star called their military service into question by claiming that these caps were distributed to each guard in the city that morning, even going as far as to accuse some of them of wearing these hats sideways, as though they had never worn one before. These guards, who were noted to have been strictly disciplined, had brought weapons with them to use if the need came to defend the audience and performers. Clubs made of broomsticks were reportedly passed out to the security force inside the concert grove. Soda bottles were said to have been laid out neatly in what resembled ammunition piles. As soon as police heard of the weapons, they demanded the trade unionists surrender them. The tension in the air was palpable. Union guards and law enforcement officers alike were bracing themselves for the day ahead.
People said to themselves, the first time the trouble was an accident. The police didn't arrive until very late and things got out of hand. But this time the whole world has its eyes on Peekskill, and there can't possibly be any trouble. The governor would not allow it. The state troopers would not allow it. The county police would not allow it. District Attorney Finelli is in enough hot water already, and certainly he would not allow it. So it'll just be a sunny, peaceful concert, and we'll bring the kids and have a good time. As inconceivable as it sounds, that is what people said to themselves and to each other. The reality of what did happen was even more inconceivable.
The arrival of the audience went over smoothly. Law enforcement took careful measures to prevent another traffic jam like that of August 27th. This was done by detouring all other traffic on Hillside Avenue and Red Mill Road for approximately 2 miles on either side. Parking on these roads was prohibited for the day. These measures allowed for the buses and cars carrying concertgoers from the summer colonies as well as from the city to arrive safely. As an extra precaution, Gaffney ordered several hundred policemen to march into the grove where the concert would take place, within the inner line of concert guards. The efforts of the police to separate the spectators and other traffic from those attending the concert gave Robeson, Fast, and others a sense of security, but this would not be the case for much longer. Spectators and supporters of the protest parade had lined themselves along the end of Red Mill Road and Hillside Avenue.
When we got near the concert grounds, a lot of women who were being held back by state troopers started hooting and jeering at us, shouting, "Reds, Jew bastards, go back to Russia, go back to Jew City." And one woman shouted at me, "You can smile now, but you won't smile tomorrow morning."
To protect the audience and performers from any danger, Leon Strauss devised a strategic formation with his guards. 2 rings encircling the site. One ring located on the border of the grove, and another located further in the grounds where the concert would actually take place. These lines were composed of roughly 3,000 tradesmen who volunteered to act as security.
The groups of trade unions cut over the fields, the woods, out of sight frequently, and then all of a sudden the line began to take shape. First a piece of it here, then another piece there, then sections to fill in. Then the gaps grew smaller and smaller, and then suddenly there was this endless wall of human bodies solidly around the whole great area. Below, in the center of the natural arena, where a single tall oak tree stood, a second line of guards was established within the audience.
This force was organized by former veterans, former officers in World War II who had combat service, so there was a command post and field radios and, a medical post and water and food. I mean, there was everything organized as if it were a military campaign without guns, with enormous discipline, and people who came from elsewhere were integrated into the force there to relieve some of the guys who had been there since early morning. We came at about 10 in the morning. They got there at 5:30, 6 o'clock to secure the area and so on. So it was quite an experience, to come in and see these thousands of guys. They're yours. You don't know what you're going to be coming into. And you see, oh, these are our guys. They all have the District 65 hats and the Furrier's hats. Some of them had American Legion hats, veterans of foreign wars, but there are foreign Legion and foreign wars guys. So that it's interesting. It wasn't that all the veterans groups were of the mind of the right-wingers and the mob. Not true at all.
The Veterans Protest Parade, which was expected to draw as many as 30,000, proved to be a massive disappointment. Only 1,000 veterans from the area would participate. Claims were made afterwards that the police prevented veterans from arriving at the parade site to avoid jamming the roads.
Police detoured the traffic to keep the street on which the veterans are parading free of cars. All cars have been circling around the area, entering the concert grounds from what would amount to the rear.
The parade started to form on the side roads at Oregon Corners at about 11 a.m. and got underway about 1 p.m. Because of the prohibition on parking and detouring of traffic, the parade, composed of 1,500 men, proceeded without difficulty, marched and counter-marched in front of the entrance to the meeting grounds.
Originally scheduled to begin at noon, they were delayed due to the small turnout, and as a result, the parade began around 1 p.m. Legionnaires and other veterans marched as though in a crusade against the invasion before their eyes.
Coming along here is another group of veterans. Apparently they have broken up their parade into sections.
Color guards in the parade display their carbines with pride, prompting police officers to remove the breech bolts from the firearms as a precaution. 6 West Point cadets were spotted among the spectators before they were invited into the parade by an Army corporal. Despite the smaller size of the parade, it still had characteristics reminiscent of a small-town festival. Balloons, ice cream, and other merchandise were sold to spectators. But the festive attitude of some would not be shared by all. Veterans started throwing rocks at the line of Union guards, though most fell short. Several times during the parade, spectators attempted to surge through police lines in order to enter the concert grounds, but were pushed back by troopers. One man had been arrested during the scuffle, and officers found a 6-inch knife strapped to his leg. At 2:45 p.m., towards the conclusion of the parade, a man who the Evening Star later compared to Paul Revere mounted a horse and attempted to make a fast dash into the picnic grounds. As he was being apprehended, he repeatedly struck an officer with his riding crop and was placed under arrest. Just as he did on August 27th, Commander John Zimmer concluded the parade and asked the men to go home. While law enforcement had managed to separate veterans and concertgoers earlier in the day, their decision to permit the parade to disband directly in front of the concert grounds would prompt many to conclude that there had been a grander conspiracy against Paul Robeson and the concertgoers. Many of the veterans, instead of going home, simply joined the crowd of protesters already present at the junction of Red Mill Road and Hillside Avenue. This was recognized by Superintendent Gaffney as the contributing factor in what ultimately led to a horrific attack before the day's end. But when Leon Strauss and Howard Fast made a request to Gaffney to provide an escort for Robeson, who was soon to arrive, Gaffney rejected the request. In return, Gaffney made an ultimatum.
Superintendent Gaffney came to Leon Strauss and demanded he pull the whole perimeter a quarter of a mile. This would have placed the guards and audience in one solid block, giving the fascists an opportunity to swarm into the place and prevent the concert. Strauss refused. Gaffney ranted and threatened, but Strauss pointed out that we had rented this ground and that we could put our guards wherever we pleased, and that we damn well intended to do so. He also pointed out that at no point were our guards less than 20 yards from the state road, and he didn't see how any trouble could arise unless we were attacked. Gaffney gave his ultimatum. Either we pull our line of guards back, or he would pull out every one of his cops. We don't need him, Strauss smiled. There won't be any violence in this place. A while later, 300 troopers marched out of the grounds and took up places on the road.
Despite the lack of police protection within the grounds, all seemed peaceful down in the hollow. It was a hot summer Sunday, and much of the audience was able to relax, as they were located far from the hostile spectators along the road. The grassy hollow had the look of a county fair, with picnics and sunbathers all around. Soft drinks and ice cream concessionaires traveled through the crowd of what was now estimated to be more than 20,000. The concert started at 2 p.m. as planned, beginning with a performance of the Star-Spangled Banner by Sylvia Khan. An invocation was performed by Reverend John W. Darr Jr., asking for the blessings of God on those inside the grove, who he said were fighting for their liberties. Other artists performed classical pieces by Bach, Verdi, Chopin, and Liszt, while a relatively unknown singer-songwriter named Pete Seeger performed several songs of the folk music tradition. In between performances, one of the guards rushed to Howard Fast.
I walked over to the sound truck and was standing there talking to the engineer when the man responsible for security at the center came over and motioned me aside. "Howard," he said, "I want you to set the sound truck under that big oak, right under it." "How can we? If we put the sound truck under the tree, our people will be singing through the branches. That doesn't make sense." "Because we've had our scouts out in the woods and up there on the hill since early this morning, and we just learned they flushed up 2 local patriots who made a little nest for themselves up there overlooking the valley. They had high-powered rifles with telescopic sights. In other words, they want to kill Paul. So put the sound truck under the tree."
The local defense force patrolled the woods behind the immediate concert area and the hills surrounding. And, how should I put it, cleared those areas.
Was there a sniper nest?
2. One, they overpowered. I think 3 guys broke 2 rifles and chased them off. They didn't, they roughed them up a bit, but didn't really beat them up.
They had guns and they were...
Telescopic sights, rifles.
The news alarmed Fast, who started to contemplate canceling the concert outright. However, Paul, who had been transported secretly in one of the many cars to arrive that day, was adamant that he would sing. Fast decided to organize a third circle of defense surrounding Paul when he performed underneath the oak tree. 15 workers volunteered to stand next to and around Paul to act as a human shield. Union men, white and black, risked their lives in that moment as Paul Robeson climbed onto the flag-draped truck to perform.
So the men you see in the pictures behind my father, standing on the platform, which was right under a tree, but right in the line of fire of any snipers.
They were brave men.
Yeah, well, not only that, what was extraordinary is that so many wanted to volunteer, there was almost a fight among them for the privilege, so they had to draw straws. And the first man to draw a short straw sat down and cried.
Wild cheering and whistling broke out in the audience as he appeared, safe and unharmed. The crowd moved in close as Robeson began singing songs such as Go Down Moses and The House I Live In. As he performed, veterans along the road at the top of the hill attempted to drown out his voice with shouting, drums, and car horns. None of this stopped Paul. To close his set, Paul chose his most famous piece, Old Man River. As Paul had evolved from an actor to an activist, so did the songs in his repertoire. Old Man River would be no exception. He had changed the song from the narrative of a black ship worker along the Mississippi to become an anthem for change and determination to continue fighting for a better world. The principles instilled in Paul from his father many years before had brought him here. From a small acorn on Witherspoon Street, a mighty oak had grown. Weathered by the course of time, he still stood tall and proud, determined to remain standing in the face of all that would come his way. In that moment, beneath the lone oak tree in the hollow, all of the noise from the roads on the hill above faded away, and he sang.
We must keep fighting until we're tired. And Old Man River, he'll just keep rolling on.
When Robeson's performance concluded, Howard Fast took the microphone to solicit contributions from the audience.
Every dollar you give is a dollar for a free America against the un-American filth walking back on the road. We've received a hatful of money from the real vets, not the trash on the road who are guarding the roadway.
Fast's comments, which over the loudspeaker were audible from the road where the veterans and other spectators were, certainly exacerbated the already tense situation. The remarks inflamed many along the road, prompting them to participate in the violence to come. The concert ended between 3:30 and 4 p.m. The police attempted to clear an exit out of the grounds in order to keep traffic calm and organized. The anger and frustration in the crowd of veterans reached a fever pitch. They started attacking attendees who were still arriving as the concert was winding down. A free-for-all would ensue. Bottles and rocks sailed into the air. Police reinforcements rushed into the fray on Red Mill Road to permit the concertgoers to pass.
There's been the first bit of violence. I don't know who started it. Police have grabbed someone here. Police are pushing everyone back. Oh, this is horrible. Killing crowd is trying desperately to keep these people back. The police are fighting the cops, and they are beating up a Negro. They're beating up not supporting him.
One of the late arrivals caught in the fray was Eugene Bullard.
About what time did the bus leave downtown at 125th Street, roughly?
Oh, it must have been, well, I let you be the judge because I didn't hear the concert. When we got there, the concert had finished, and that must have been at that time something like 3:25. The bus, everything was blockaded. Everything was absolutely stopped. Everything. And this lasted for at least, without a word of exaggeration, a half hour or more. The people got fidgety. They were screaming, too. Someone got nasty with the chauffeur. "What are you doing? What are you waiting for?" So, I turned around to the people and said, "I don't know what it is all about, and you don't know what it is all about, but it is a sure thing that something is stopping the bus." Then I said, "Wait a minute, and I will see. I got out of the bus, myself alone. I walked up to an officer. I said, "I beg your pardon, sir. Would you please be kind enough to tell me what we are supposed to do here? We are stranded." He said, "I don't give a damn what you do."
Now, can you tell us whether that was at the entrance or was it some distance up?
It must have been 40 yards distance from the entrance, because I figured that the only place to get some information would be near the entrance. The officer said, "I don't give a damn what you do." And I says, "Thank you." In the meantime, I noticed that there was a bus that had been put across the road, and I seen that with my own eyes, so that the cars could not pass. So I went back. I said, "Listen, ladies and gentlemen, this darn thing don't look very good. You have got a lot of kids here and a lot of women, and you don't know what it's all about. But I happen to be an old soldier and fought 2 wars, and this thing can turn out bad. I'm going to get out of the bus, and I'm going down to the grounds." So I got out, and as I gets opposite of the entrance, I had my coat on my arm. I had my beret with a bar with my medals. I got here and started to cross over as one might, and this person says, "You black bastard," and spit. He spit in my face. It was a civilian, and instead of the officer trying to find out what happened, they lit on me.
Bullard's attack was documented by photographers, as well as a CBS camera crew on scene. 5 officers attacked Bullard, beating him mercilessly until a permanent scar was left on his left arm and further stress put onto his already worn spine and neck. The medals on his beret, earned for his service during the First and Second World Wars, were stolen by the officers.
One of them had my beret. One of them grabbed it. On the beret, I had a badge about that size with 11 miniature medals. The officer smacked my beret out of my hand, and I said, "Give me that." At this time, the medals dropped off of the hat. They picked up my medals.
Well, can you tell us which officer it was?
How can you, when you have got 5 officers beating you over the head with clubs?
Now, let me ask you this, Mr. Bullard, before I go on. You say that you were able to get up under your own power. Were you?
Well, no, I don't think I was. I got up because when I found myself, I was where they had a tent there on the inside of the field there, first aid. And I was being carried across the road by someone who I don't know. As I started through, there was a soldier who had his eye knocked out. To me, he looked like a Filipino in a uniform.
Army uniform?
Army uniform. And he was hit over the head. He was alone. He was hit by an officer. This boy was there with the yellow. You could just imagine a soft-boiled egg cut in half was running out of this kid's eye. So naturally, the reaction of seeing him in that state, I says, "Wait a minute. Take this man. Don't worry about me."
Other veterans who came to see Robeson perform received harsh treatment from the crowd. The Evening Star would report that military police arrived on scene from West Point with orders to evacuate any military personnel, with one MP reportedly saying that uniformed soldiers were forbidden to attend leftist rallies. They stopped and questioned a black soldier wearing a brand new Army uniform. Only after displaying proper credentials would he be released into the hollow. Other MPs expressed interest in questioning the military men in Strauss's guard line. The focus of the military police seemed to be on identifying soldiers who supported Robeson.
There's a group of young boys here yelling at the people from their cars.
When the first cars exited the Hollowbrook Country Club, police sent the automobiles down Red Mill Road, but they were attacked by a barrage of rocks, bottles, and other projectiles. Groups of local men had gathered stones and rocks as ammunition, lining themselves along Red Mill Road and Hillside Avenue. The concertgoers were forced to run the gauntlet of the extremely narrow and winding Red Mill Road in order to escape.
Our driver tried to drive us as quickly as he could, but the police kept slowing us down. One of the men in the bus yelled duck, but before she could duck, she saw a rock come through the window and she felt both of her eyes, her mouth, and her right hand burn. As soon as possible, one of the people bandaged her eyes and had her spit out saliva, combined with blood and glass.
District Attorney Finelli reportedly made several pleas for the crowd to disperse before state policemen were forced to drive the attackers on Red Mill Road away. On the attacks along Red Mill Road, George Finelli would later report the following.
As the first of the concert goers' cars left the concert area and proceeded up Red Mill Road, stoning of these automobiles took place about 300 feet up Red Mill Road. The police at once converged upon the scene, moved the crowd back, and no further disorder of that nature took place in that area or any other area within a mile of the concert area.
In reality, a mile down Hillside Avenue, buses full of men, women, and children from the concert were attacked by a continuing barrage of stones from men hidden behind the stone walls and thick trees that lined the country roads. These attacks would continue for several more hours after the initial attacks on Red Mill Road. The role of the police in stopping the violence was questioned by many of the victims and eyewitnesses.
One of the leaders of the guards walked out and made the suggestion. Well, they made the suggestion that the Negroes get on the buses, and they were going to get out. So just as I was starting out of the line, along with many others, the cop says, come on, can't you walk faster? So we began to move on a bit faster. He says, why in the hell don't you black son of a bitches go back to Russia where you came from? So we looked around at the guy and says, we are Americans. And this is what I said. We are Americans. And as a result of being Americans, we have a right to come any place we want to and listen to anybody we want to. So at this point, the cop says, shut up, you black son of a bitch, and get on that bus. And at that time, he socked me in my mouth. And a lot of the guys around us, they booed the cops. And as a result of booing the cops came over with their sticks and began to club the guys on the line.
And the police had formed almost like a tunnel that you had to go through, and we had to go right and we had to go through the gauntlet, where on both sides of the road there were the same people in quotation marks, who had been throwing epithets and ugly faces at us when we came in. They now substituted that, at least the ugly faces, or the epithets, with rocks. And the rocks kept coming straight at us. And actually, I was full of admiration for the driver of our car, because the windshield cracked into a million pieces, but it didn't shatter. And he just kept driving straight. And you know, you never know how you're going to react in a situation of stress until it happens to you. Instead of being afraid, I was furious. And I felt myself getting up from the back seat and shaking my fists and shouting back.
Police attempted to control the flow of traffic by directing exiting cars and buses down the only roads available: Hillside Avenue, south to Peekskill and north to Putnam Valley, and Red Mill Road towards Mohican Lake. By directing the vehicles down all three routes away from the concert site, it was hoped that it would prevent a traffic jam. but it would also lead to charges from the victims that the police must have been in league with the rioters to deliberately send them down these routes knowing they would be attacked. While police were certainly seen fraternizing with the rioters throughout the day's events, every route leading away from the concert grounds was lined with attackers. Concertgoers who were detoured by way of Hillside Avenue going into Putnam Valley were forced to turn back by a hostile crowd. Howard Fast turned right on Hillside Avenue towards Peekskill and encountered similar groups of attackers, as well as police, unable or unwilling to stop them. Fast would argue that the officers were purposefully assigned to protect the attackers.
On the left side of the road, there were two policemen. They were about 20 feet apart, and between them were 6 or 7 legionnaires with a great pile of heavy rocks. As my car came within range, they began to throw. The cops didn't throw. They watched, smiling approval. And it became evident that these policemen had been detached as guards for the group of rock throwers, just in case a car should stop and turn on the rock throwers. And so it went from group to group through that nightmare gauntlet.
With traffic beginning to back up, the occupants of the vehicles became easy targets, which enticed the assailants to emerge from the roadside and directly attack the passengers, dragging them out of their vehicles and beating them mercilessly. A witness testified that she saw a car carrying a woman and her baby attacked by a group of men who dragged her from the car. The baby was taken from her, as the woman was thrown over a hedge on the side of the road. Witnesses also testified that the attackers singled out African Americans and Jews.
As the bus rolled on, I noticed a man approaching us in his car, and his face I shall never forget. For at that moment he yelled, "You goddamn nigger!" He said it with all the hatred and conviction that was possible. I'd never seen him before. I've never harmed him in any way, but he hated me for one reason. I was black.
We asked the state trooper to arrest the thrower. He said, "Go on home, you dirty Jew kike, before you get your head split."
While George Finelli claimed the violence only occurred within a mile of the concert grounds and only on Red Mill Road, state police would report that the violence raged over an area of 10 square miles. People who were completely disconnected from the concert were also attacked. 2 buses filled with African Americans from the city who had visited FDR's library in Hyde Park were unfortunate enough to have been mistaken for attendees of the concert and had their vehicles attacked. A bus filled with patrons from a bar in the Bronx was attacked by Peekskill men until they came out to explain that they themselves were former soldiers who had no knowledge of the concert. An American flag was draped over the bus's radiator to permit safe passage through Peekskill. But even as they got further away from the concert grounds, attendees were still subject to harassment and violence.
2 miles or so from the concert grounds, a car pulled into a gas station. This car, like so many others, left a trail of blood behind it. 5 adults and 1 child emerged, and they were all covered with blood from head to foot. The child was weeping softly, and they stood like people dazed. And a few feet away, a group of young hoodlums hurled rocks at the passing cars. I pulled over to the gas station to stop and see if we could help the wounded people. But a cop stationed there ran at us, screaming oaths and beating the car with his club. When he started to draw his revolver, we drove on. Another car stopped and we saw the policeman beat the windshield of the car with his club while he drew his revolver with his other hand. It was behavior which bordered on the paranoid. And though I have many times in the past seen police go into their frenzied dance of hatred against workers or progressives, I never saw anything to equal this display. In Peekskill, in Buchanan, and in Croton-on-Hudson, we continued to run the gauntlet of rocks, and the road we traveled was running with blood and littered with broken glass. Never in all my life have I seen so much blood. Never have I seen so many people so cruelly cut and bleeding.
Mr. Bullard, did you go back to New York on the bus that night?
Yes.
What time did you get back to 125th Street?
The bus was so broken up. There was a woman that had a broken arm, and a child had a broken arm. There was not one window left in the bus. All along the road, there was bottles and bricks thrown into the bus. You know this section much better than I do. When we left the golf grounds,
Let me interrupt you. What time did you leave up there as far as you know?
6:10, 6:15, around then. And when we got to the main highway, say 4 or 5 miles from there, the troopers stopped us. Don't think you're going to take that bus into town. And they made everyone get off of the bus, including this woman with the broken arm and a kid that was hurt. I don't know whether I did any good or not, but I had all the kids lie on the floor and all the women lie on the floor. There wasn't one window left in that bus.
As the remaining cars and buses continued to leave the Hollow Brook, within a 7-car convoy in a maroon Fraser with blankets covering the windows, Paul Robeson was inside, protected by tradesmen who laid on top of him as he was pressed against the rear floorboard of the vehicle. The vehicle would have 2 of its windows smashed and 2 heavy dents on its side. Despite this, he would return safely to the city around 7:30 p.m. At the same time, state police requested over the radio that people remain out of Peekskill and its vicinity for their own safety. Meanwhile, at the site of the concert, the last group of attendees was finally able to leave. Leon Strauss and the line of Union guards, who had protected the grounds and attendees for nearly 12 hours, began to depart as well. Suddenly, police officers on site confronted the guards.
Then the police rushed into the concert area and surrounded our men. They arrested me and about 25 others at the head of the column and held the rest of the group where they were. They detached us and led us to a separate field, kept us for an hour and a half with our hands over our heads in the glare of searchlights while police went over us for weapons.
The Evening Star would claim that this was provoked by the guards, who allegedly attacked the officers.
State police had trouble with the guards when they made a search of the scene. Fighting between pro-Reds and troopers broke out several times. Nightsticks wielded by the gray uniformed troopers quelled the disturbances quickly.
However, the narrative of an all-out fight ever taking place between the guards and officers would not be repeated by District Attorney Finelli, who already had a record of grasping at straws to paint Robeson and his followers as the instigators of the trouble in Peekskill.
As one of the automobiles bearing a number of these guards passed through the concert grounds, one of the guards swung at a state trooper with the baseball bat. This car and all other cars bearing guards were searched for weapons. Approximately 200 baseball bats, a number of golf clubs, monkey wrenches, and tire irons wrapped in newspapers, glass bottles, and other weapons were confiscated by the police and taken to the command post. The cars were permitted to leave carrying the full capacity of guards.
Other than the report of a single guard's attempted assault of an officer, neither Finelli nor Gaffney would report an outbreak of fighting. By 9 p.m., the guards were released from their detainment. They requested permission to march to the Mohegan colony, but police refused. Instead, Sheriff Fred Rusco deputized the remaining drivers and provided a police escort to get those who remained out of the golf course as quickly and safely as possible. The Hollow Brook would not be completely cleared until 10:30 p.m. that evening. The day was over. But the wounds of Peekskill were deep for those who had endured the violent hatred hurled toward them. And for some, these wounds would never heal.
If I had known there was going to be any trouble in any way, shape, or form, I have been having treatments for 4 years for heart trouble, with 2 screws in my spine, 54 years old. Do you think that any person in that condition Any sensible person would go 40 miles to put themselves in danger, with a chance of getting killed, when one punch or just a fall might kill me. I hadn't done any more than you would have done. If I had resisted the policeman, I would have been locked up or would have been shot. I was ashamed. We know what is going on here in America concerning black and white. In a minority group that we have here in the United States as black Americans, that is no problem. It is the white man who makes it a problem. And I love America, and I'm willing to die for America. But I wish that America would love me just a bit. Not give me anything, but just let me navigate. Just treat me as a human.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long ways from home. A long ways from home. Come, my brother. A long ways from home. Come, my brother.